as important yourself? I know you've sort of taught about it yourself.
So what you're asking, that is it necessary to have a therapeutic take or perspective on well, contemplation or meditation practices for Westerners?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, um, yes. Um, so I'm not a psychotherapist. I don't have education, formal education in that. So my own education comes from practice, and a lot of practice, as well as just healing my own traumas, human related traumas, a lot of it parent related traumas. Uh, well, to me, it has been like a journey in the sense that, you know, I've also wanted to try out myself if Buddha nature that only has positive qualities. There's no fear, there's no anxiety, no trauma in Buddha nature. So if recognition of Buddha nature could be used to heal little by little, not necessarily suddenly, but little by little, used to heal these human related traumas. And my experience is that yes, but like I said, I'm not a psychotherapist, and I don't, what I've experienced in my life, what my traumas were, there are much, much worse traumas that people have. So, I simply don't have like not even nearly a complete view about what the needs of somebody who is much, whose traumas are much worse than mine. But having said that, you listed those five themes that Daniel Brown presented, and these are very, 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 very common to me. Do you say that? Very common to me, familiar to me.
Mm.
So, but if you asked about the Western meditation culture and scene and Western people, so the way how we practice is very different from many approaches. Let's put it like that. So, like old Dharma Mind members, myself as an old Zen Buddhist practitioner, it's those are very, very different types of methods. Really, the form of Dharma methods many times, are much more rigid, much more masculine, much harder in the sense. Although there is also laughter and enjoyment aspect, but the enjoyment aspect usually doesn't come to the meditation hall. So the jokes and laughter are made outside of it. So it's kind of a, that's the whole influence of, I think, the influence of early Buddhism, Hinayana Buddhism, and especially the monastic, monasticism long has been considered ideal and much better. It has been considered that it's much better to retreat, go away from the material world, family life, working, sex, enjoyment of any type, and become monastics without any of those distractions. So, so I think that this whole well, is it intentional propaganda from monastic system? I think it is to some degree. I think some of it is unintentional, that this, you know, that the that these, these views have spread into a lot of Buddhism, you know, and among Buddhist practitioners. But but I've had a fair share of those views of renunciation where there is little or no room for enjoyment, and have done those strict, rigid, hard, very demanding retreats enough that to say that, well, one thing is that it didn't work for me that well, and I know others who felt the same. But also when it comes to healing aspect of Dharma practice, I've seen really awful cases with my own eyes in Japan, in different Zen centers in Europe. I've heard really awful cases where, the people come to Dharma many to heal and to get better and to find hope in lives. But then I think that most ancient Dharma methods that have been established a long time ago, they really, I don't know if they didn't have a need for it, although I kind of think that, humanity being so aggressive and wars and conflicts being everywhere, I think that that same need for healing has been there before. But at any case, this aspect of healing as part of Dharma practice is not found in most ancient systems. So it is. I think it would be right to say that it's somewhat common to see people who follow those old methods, have problems with this, because they are just focused on getting awakened and enlightened, and there's no room for anything else. And this point, if that is the view, it misses the fact that healing is part of getting awakened. You can't, if you have been beaten up as a child, or something awful happened to you early on in your life, and then you go to, you haven't dealt with it, okay, and then you go to start meditation practice in whatever kind of group, and then go on retreats, and then the goal is to use whatever concentration practices or inquiry practices to get awakened. But then there's no tools, no advice, for no mention of that you can use the time there on the sitting cushion healing yourself in different ways. I remember the greatest Japanese Zen master of modern times, Zen master Hakuin. He had the same problem. He was something like 25 years old and had been practicing for a number of years, and then he developed some pranic problems, some imbalances that, to me it sounds like his problems with the practice were very similar than what I had back in 14, 15 years ago, after I had come back from Japan. And I had really a lot of problems because it was all about strong, sustained focus without much relaxation. So, I burned myself out that way. And I think Hakuin had a similar problem, that nobody told him to relax. Everybody told him to strive towards enlightenment as fast as possible, with as much energy as possible, with as much focus as possible. And of course, the human organism cannot tolerate that. It's like saying to a runner that, um, you know, the practice is to keep running, keep running, keep running, and don't take a rest, don't sit down. And of course, that's an obvious example that you're gonna die at some point if you continue doing that long enough. Um, so the Buddha within only has positive qualities. There is no the energy of the Buddha within is pure, it's fresh, and it's no illness in it. There's no causes of illness in it. So I've been talking about this a lot for many years, that one question is that, do ancient Dharma methods, do they really work? Do they really deliver those awakenings and enlightenments for practitioners who put time and energy and devotion? And I don't think that's the case. It's quite rare to find sanghas, groups of practitioners, where there is significant degree of awakening experiences has happened. I've talked about this so many times that I think that you're already completely fed up hearing me saying that. But the plain fact about that is that if we don't have breakthroughs, bhumi openings, awakening experiences, it means directly that the Buddha nature is not being recognized, which means that there is no healing either taking place. Ignorance stays, and there is no healing either taking place. So, understanding that, it is completely obvious that all those hundreds and thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of hours spent on retreat, on sitting mat, just enduring the physical pain and discomfort coming out of so much sitting, it's useless. If you're sitting there in samsaric mind state, that in fact is not recognition of Buddha nature. It is as simple as that. And I think this is one of the core problems in Dharma today. And that's why, people are not getting healed through their Dharma practice. So they simply, focus stronger on following your breath. It's just gonna make those traumas, which really can be used as a fuel for practice, it makes it subside. It keeps it suppressed. So, yeah, there is a lot to be updated in with practice methods. a lot. And I don't think that, I don't think the problem is in practitioners, in seekers. I think the problem is in methods and the way how methods are taught in pedagogics. So my experience, to wrap this up, my experience is that recognition of the Buddha within, recognition of myself as a Buddha, that can be done in different ways, like I taught in tantric trauma therapy. I hope to kind of soon get to expand on those. I taught the basic form of that last October, and I hope to get to kind of expand it, workshop it more. But recognition of the Buddha within does and has the power to heal whatever it is that needs to be healed. That is my experience. But again, like I said, I don't, there are people who have much worse traumas, and I think that in that case, well, that's an obvious point that, then it's probably good to, if you can afford to see a psychotherapist, then it's good to do that. But I'm really happy, James, to see that, you have been working on these very issues for a few years now. So I'm really happy to see that you're really giving it attention. It means that sooner or later you'll get past it.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like what I've been feeling recently is like I go from contracted to like a very sort of gross sense of myself to a very refined sense of
To
myself.
what gross sense of self to
A very refined,
refined.
I was to like where the energetic feeling is so subtle for me because I'm used to such a sort of gross sense of myself that I can't even sort of gauge the subtlety of it. Um, so yeah, but it's just quite painful. I suppose everyone goes through some sort of stuff. It's just quite painful going through the different, going back between flipping back between the stages. But yeah, I do feel that but it is definitely my area of interest within Dharma and how people are. I know a lot of people suffer trauma to some extent, and I find that I've sat for years in Zen, and as you said, a lot of what was happening for me was just being blocked by experience from the past. Essentially, now I look back, and probably, whilst I don't agree with you entirely that I don't think it's entirely wasted time, because I do think there was some emotional clearing that went on for me during that time. I think that I could have taken up practices such as these idealized parents that would have helped to loosen up all the junk. I think Zen's fixation on the utter simplicity of practice is misguided. I agree with that. I think that it's one tool which of itself isn't particularly effective because there's other stuff that needs to sort of
Yeah.
but, yeah, thank you.
There is a question sent by Irene or Irene. Is there any substitute for Rushen practice that is not at all physical? which should still have similar effect? Yes, there is. So, like I briefly described, Rushen practice, although, one might think in the beginning that it's all about physical shaking and releasing tensions and stress and traumas from the body mind through physical, twitching, shaking, trembling, that kind of thing. It's really, I would say, more internal practice. So, internal meaning that it's about releasing tension, stresses, and trauma in the mind. So, body is just a tool or vehicle to let out that internal stress. So, if and when, in case of if one is ill, has a short-term or long-term illness, and it cannot be physically practiced, the same releasing can still be done purely on emotional level. But it may be for some people more difficult to kind of get it going that way. But here's a simple way to try that. Allow yourself to cry. And cry as much as you need to, until it comes to an end, naturally. Allow yourself to laugh as much as you feel like laughing, until that comes to an end. Allow yourself to feel sad as much as is needed, until sadness comes to an end. Allow yourself to be angry, anxious, jealous, lustful, fearful, whatever fear related issues you might have. Allow those one by one, each emotional state one by one, come out. And the really an important point about Rushen, whether done like this, less physically or more fully physically, is that when you cry, for example, you allow yourself to cry about some issues that have been paining in your heart, something hurtful that happened short or longer time ago. So you just let those cries to be cried. So, whatever emotional state you're working with, be completely aware of it. So this is still a Dharma practice, which means that whatever emotion you're working on, you're perfectly aware of it as it happens. As you're crying, as you're experiencing sadness, as you might be experiencing anger, perhaps sitting on your couch at home, possibly shouting swear words, shits, fucks, fuck off, something like this. You can express it through voice. When we do Rushen on retreats, there are people laughing, shouting, screaming, sometimes crying, sobbing. But whatever it is, be aware of it. So it's not about going and mulling over or brooding over or going into that emotional state and going into it. And then when you stop doing Rushen, nothing has changed. That is not the point. Point is to bring awareness and be aware of that very trauma or burden from the inside of it. There is. And one thing that is also very important, whichever type of Rushen you're doing, is that don't hold back. So I see that a lot on retreats. When we do Rushen, people are holding back, people are controlling it. But the point is exactly to allow us to feel those emotions in full without any censorship. Because it's that censorship that got us into problem in the first place, or one of the factors in the equation. So if you feel like shouting, screaming, do it in full, that you really let it out. Don't worry about neighbors hearing it. And this is actually why it said in, I remember Jigme Lingpa mentions this in, what's his book? It's Vajra something, the book. He says that it's good to do this in wilderness when you're away from people. But I've done it in an apartment building and nobody came to complain. One thing that is kind of related to what I was telling to James, and we did some dynamic concentration practice earlier today, and we do it in Rainbow Body Yoga on daily basis. So there is a very sharp focus there, momentary, explosive focus. But like I always say when we end the round of shouting syllables, I always say that relax completely. As if the body died. When somebody dies, when the mind leaves the body becomes completely limp. There is no tension in there whatsoever. Okay? So in the same way, becoming completely passive, completely relaxed. So there is no, like, you shout the last Hung Pet, Hung Pet! I'm holding my hands, maybe you didn't see it. Hung Pet! So there is this tense anticipation. Don't hold that at all. Completely limp, completely passive. This is very important. So because we use dynamic concentration, it's also necessary to, that's the explosive end. We have masculine and feminine principles. The masculine and feminine principles. Explosive concentration is as the far end of masculine. And then we need to balance it, we need to have the extreme feminine, the extreme relaxation. Extreme yang, extreme yin. So if we only are concerned about this extreme masculine, That's how you end up with pranic problems like I did and Zen Master Hakuin did. Because you're just focused on concentration, power, explosiveness, bang, 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 and doesn't work that way. So there needs to be complete letting go at the other end. Not even the slightest tension held.
Just following on from that, it seems like there's a connection here between censorship in Rushen or emotional Rushen. Like you mentioned, cry, until you can't stop crying. I couldn't make myself cry if someone offered me £1,000. I think that perhaps there's a connection between that censorship and the safety aspect of trauma or whatever. It seems like we've got big time in the West. I certainly feel it myself. I felt it on retreat doing Rishen. I was able to let go to a certain extent, but there was this holding back which goes on, which seems to be a barrier to practicing for a lot of Western people. I wonder if you've got. I do like the idea of going off into the forest and just shouting. That's something that I could feel that I could do. I'd feel very self-conscious doing it. But I suppose I could do. But have you got something to say about how to get over that censorship? Is there any sort of tricks you can trick yourself into just letting go?
Yes, there is. What is that? What is that word? Pretend it. Start doing it, pretending it. That's to get started. Like you started by saying that you couldn't cry, and if you don't cry, you don't cry. That's it. But one way to go through all of these emotions is that you start crying, pretending that you feel like crying. You trigger the anger by pretending that you're angry, and then at some point it takes a life of its own. If there is something to cry about or to be angry about. But so when regarding that holding back, you have to get out of your mind and let the body do it. This is kind of an obvious example. The experience of having sex. Well, often it is the case that the mind might be momentarily at least occupied with fantasies and shame, probably guilt in our post-Christian culture. Shame, guilt, fantasies, hopes. Oh, I hope my partner did this or that, But at the same time, sex is an excellent example because there are moments when you're doing it only with your body. Okay? That's what you have to do in a different context with Rushen. Let the body do it. So that the mind doesn't interfere or doesn't control.
You could also join acting classes, beginners, improvisation.
Mm-hmm.
There's techniques involved. It's that faking it. What you mentioned, Kim, is if you're looking for a practical.
That sounds quite a good idea. Quite like that idea.
especially improvisation techniques. There's an acting teacher called Meisner who taught a technique to allow the body and to act spontaneously without learning lines. I forget the detail, but that's the idea. And then you allow the body to just respond. You get a prompt and then, you know, that kind of thing, faking it. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of a film I watched recently where two actors, they're in a competition to see who can cry first. And I was just amazed that anyone could do that on demand, to be honest. Yeah, that might be worth a try. Cheers, Luke.
I can give a call to your neighbor and ask him to smash your car outside. I don't think it will take long for you to get sobbing, trembling and crying at the same time.
I'll smash it for you.
Well, that's a very generous offer, thank you. A bit of a left turn, really. I wasn't expecting that as being a Dharma lesson, but I always check around my car when I get there, because I see people with like massive like scratches down the side. You know, people keyed at someone's car. I probably would cry if I saw that. But don't do it to test it, please.
First you would cry and then you would become mad angry.
Especially if it was someone from your meditation sangha.
Mm.
When Buddhist groups go bad.
I think there might be some trauma attached to that, to be quite honest.
I started thinking, James, what you said that regarding your Zen days, that there was still some benefit from it. I have thought about that a lot, whether there was benefit for me from my Zen days. And well, maybe very little something, but I really can't. You know, what I learned from not only Zen but some other traditional approaches was about how to not do something.
I tell you why. Well, my view of it was that, and this is how I understood it, was that a lot of the pain that I initially got in my knees was described to me, it didn't feel like physical pain. It felt like emotional pain. And that's gone. And I wasn't aware, and the same happened in my hips, and I wasn't aware of the amount of contraction I feel in my chest, upper chest. And that became apparent to me. So it was always there. Well, I believe it was always there, but it just sort of revealed itself. So it did feel that I was a working through of something, not on a physical level, but on an energetic level. I mean, it got to the place here in my sort of heart area where I felt it stopped. You know, and that's where I've sort of been for some time. But that was why I said, you know, that was my. I don't know what you think about that in terms of whether that emotion was emotional pain, and if so, then it definitely did clear for me. Because I know a lot of people I think most people sit with an incredible pain in their knees to start with, especially in Zen, because you're not moving, and it is incredibly painful. But then it did. I mean, it took a long time for me, but then it did go. You know?
I think that there might be even some scientific studies. I don't really keep up with the scientific scene or mindfulness studies, that side of things at all, but I think it has been scientifically tested or proven somehow that a great part of physical pain is actually psychological pain.
Mm.
But nevertheless, I wouldn't, I practiced Zen for 4.5 years or something like this, and was sitting 8 hours or more every day. And there was shitloads of pain, but that pain never went away. So it was physical pain, purely physical pain. I was in a really good shape back then, you know, like a Olympic gymnastic, you could say, in a similar shape. But yeah, I never reaped any enlightenment benefits from that painful sitting.
I don't think I did either. I don't think my pain diminished at all. I learned how to sit up straight. But to be honest, I can't really see that there were any benefits.
Yeah. I wish we could have a drink, Gwen.
Yes, be nice. We could toast the end of Zen practice.
Yeah, we could have a burial, like a, what do you call it? When you you have weddings, a funeral. We could have a Zen funeral of Zen and toast it with some good beverage.
Yeah, be good.
If any of you were forced to do a full week or a 10-day Zen retreat now, how would you manage it? How would you,
Well, I wouldn't.
would you
Wouldn't
chant?
do it. There's no point, is there?
Would you do guru yoga though? No, like if you were forced to, you had to. There's no choice. Like you're either
Take lots of ibuprofen and maybe something even stronger.
So if somebody forced me to do a Zen retreat, I don't think I would have any other option except to kill myself before it.
I want to do one. I'm going to do one. I'm going to do one of those. What do you call those Vipassana with the 10-day Goenka?
Goenka.
I think that's a good test of what that would be interesting.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, you can leave the place whenever you like. Go for it, Luke, but remember that you can leave also.
I'm curious, like when you practice Zen, you and Gwen and James, because I done 2 of those Goenka retreats, and then you first did like shamatha, like focus, and then you did vipassana. And I remember the last retreat when we did vipassana, it would have that effect that emotions kind of like poof came up. But did you guys like only do shamatha? Because you're talking about this focus.
Yeah, I think we didn't really get any proper instruction for Vipassana, even though I think the teacher talked about doing it himself, but I don't remember us ever getting any instruction in it.
Because because I remember I tried to skip doing shamatha because I didn't get, no, I tried to skip doing vipassana just because I wanted to be more focused first, and I got like, they were very strict and said like, you need to do vipassana, that's the point. But if you do just shamatha, then you kind of, that's mindfulness basically, like advanced mindfulness, I guess.
In my case, it was, I did receive clear instructions. I practiced Zen with like I received meditation instructions for Zen from 3 teachers. 2 of them Swedes, 1 of them Japanese. And I also studied with a Zen calligraphy master who was a Zen master himself, but we never really discussed about meditation other than that he said that he wasn't satisfied with the traditional Zen koan system and he didn't teach it, even though he had gone through the whole traditional training. So he just felt that it was ineffective. But I mostly practice type of samatha, type of concentration practice, but I also briefly did koan. But the koan, and I think many have this problem, you know, when you're working with koans are these illogical riddles, illogical sayings that, you know, your mind cannot. What was the one that I made up a month ago in Facebook?
Ox.
It was the ox, yeah.
I've been thinking about that one.
If there's a fat ox walking on a soft, muddy road, leaving no footprints, why it doesn't leave footprints? That's an excellent example of a koan. But I think that, you know, when you work with Zen koans, you're supposed to have the so-called great doubt, that which means that the question becomes a burning question that you feel an internal burn or desire to come up with an answer, even though it's illogical. So I think that many koan practitioners have the problem that the riddles are such that they are uninteresting. There's, you know, it's not, you can't relate to it. It's uninteresting. So yeah, I did a little bit of koan, but to me it was completely uninteresting. I wish that Terayama Sensei, my Zen calligraphy master, he would have lived longer. He passed away in 2007 when he was 69 years old, I think. He died of stomach cancer. And I wish I could have discussed with him in more detail about, you know, why he didn't teach koans, because, you know, he was the main Dharma heir of one of the greatest Japanese Zen masters of the last century, Omori Sogen. So, you know, he went through the whole traditional koan training of 1700 koans with Omori Sogen, but then it, you know, I never got to talk about this with Sensei, but, you know, then at some point he stopped teaching koans to his students. And he just told me that, you know, he didn't feel they were that effective. You know, Terayama Sensei, he traveled widely in India. I think he even went to Tibet. So he was much more familiar with different types of Dharma practices than what Japanese Zen masters usually are. So he probably saw something that abroad that he didn't see in Japanese masters, and or saw something that he didn't have. So he stopped teaching koans. And actually, later he took up Amitabha practice. Amitabha mantra of Amitabha Buddha. Amitabha can be practiced without empowerment, although empowerments for it can also be given and received.
I did some I was given a comb once, and well, when I look back at things and what you just said there about the heavy ox leaving no footprints, it sort of made your mind look at the nature of reality, like if I was enlightened, maybe I could see through that ox that this was just a creation of the mind, and there was no ox there. There was no footprints. There was no me. There was just emptiness. I think this is what, but it's for really advanced, mature students to get an inkling of this. But actually, just shining the light on it is a start, I suppose.
What was that? Shining a light on me?
Shining the light on the nature of reality, the nature of emptiness.
Yeah.
I suppose it's just a start. I remember I remember looking at sound, something that I've never looked at them before, and I thought, why when I hear a bell, why does my mind say that's a bell? what is the, really looking at it closely and saying, is it a bell? Is it there? And really looking deeply at something so simple as a ring of a bell. But there's a book, a Zen book, and I forget the name of it now. The ox and the something, and I think a Japanese Zen master who's enlightened actually drew some pictures for students to see how mature they were. And as you turn the picture, you would see an ox and a landscape behind. But as you turn the pictures, things would disappear until there was just a circle on the last page.
Ah, yes. The 10 ox herding pictures.
Yeah. And maybe this is, and it was done deliberately to see what level his students had attained.
Yeah. I sometimes thought of, that's a path map used in Zen, 10 ox herding pictures. There is one other that I can remember is Tozan's. Tozan was a ancient Chinese Zen master. There is the so-called Tozan's 5 ranks. And that's also a path map. Just 5 different stages, 5 ranks. And I've sometimes thought of making a short commentary about those, writing my own commentary. But I think it's one of those projects that I will never get to. I have much more important things to do, like watching Netflix. And such.
Slurping your tea.
Slurping my excellent Irish tea.
Is that the Barry's tea, Kim?
Yes. I just ordered 12 boxes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
It's excellent.
Master blend or gold blend?
I have both. I have Master Blend, Gold, and then the green one. What's the green one? Yeah.
Master blend's the best.
Yeah. I'm drinking Master Blend.
Yeah.
As we speak, from my skull cup.
Yeah.
Let's take 5 minutes, or let's take 10 minutes and then continue